So I can't come around parishes, I can't get to meet people, but Martine, my wife, and I are here to begin a little series thinking about what is it that God might be calling us into. And I'm not just thinking about people who may have a call to ordained ministry. I'm thinking about absolutely everyone, and that includes clergy, ourselves, that we're always having a call. It never ends. It is continued and it is repeated, and God is always moving in our prayer life to draw us into something new. Well, I'm going to begin with a magazine that we had a little look at a few days ago when we were bored, and it is a review of how many years?
Many that I don't remember.
Yeah, 40 years of science fiction on TV. And it goes through all kinds of programs. And when Martine and I were looking at it, we went back in our minds to the early programs of the Avengers and to other new sci-fi things like Torchwood, Major in Cardiff, and even the brand new sci-fi, which is Picard, based on Star Trek, we've just been finishing watching on Prime. And all of them have got robots in it. They've got the idea that there are things that work in life which embed people in a new purpose, but they're not actually aware of it yet. Do you remember the Avengers program where there was an episode where people were, I think they were like assassins, but they didn't really realize it. They'd been brainwashed.
That's right.
And they were in a car, and a car in front in the rear window would put up a kind of a pattern, and that would trigger a suppressed memory of who that person really was. They were an assassin, and then they go off and they do their work. Torchwood you like, don't you?
Love Torchwood, love Captain Jack. And with Torchwood, the episode that Peter's speaking about had people that thought they were human beings. They were married, they had jobs, they were doing normal things, until something was triggered in one of them, and she had this unbelievable sense of, I'm not a human, I'm actually from outer space. And even though it sounds bizarre, when you have feelings that you think, hang on a minute, this is normal for me, it can be as bizarre as that.
And the theme keeps on going in sci-fi. So in the last episodes of Picard, it's all about robots who don't really realize that they are robots either. They're synthetics. That is what their purpose is. But all of them need a trigger, and until that trigger comes, they don't really know what they're about or what their purpose should engage with. Well, we've heard in the last couple of days, a lot of people quote a little bit from the book of Esther. It's in chapter 4, verse 14, and it's a phrase, such a time as this. So if you're familiar with Esther, the book, then you'll know that the person Esther was from the Jewish people. She was put into exile in Persia. She had family around her, and she found herself in a position where she would have influence. But she didn't really know that until a key moment. And her uncle, Mordecai, says to her, well, maybe it was for such a moment as this that you have been put by God where you actually are. The book of Esther doesn't mention God all that much. So it's interesting that at this point, Esther has this revelation of who she is and what she is about. And one of my roles in the diocese is to encourage people just to be alert to points in our life where God is really imposing some new possibilities or new changes within us. And Esther, when she realized there was such a moment in her life, she kind of had a whole new side of her that begins to be switched on. It becomes real, it becomes a driving force within her. And she's able to approach her husband, the king, which nobody else could really do, and influence him so that the Jewish people were saved. I wonder what it might be in our current environment with the pandemic situation that we're in, that may actually be providing different opportunities for us to reflect on our life and who we are, what is happening, and what God is saying individually to us. We should always be people who are alert to what might be happening. So Martine and I will kind of explain a few things that maybe have been in our experience of God speaking to us. I remember one particular time, I was only a teenager. I was brought up in a rural environment down in Gower in Swansea, and the bishop then, Bishop Benjamin, came, and it was a confirmation service. And at the end of it, he said to me, "Oh, are you going to be a priest? Have you ever thought about that? I want you to think about it." That was a catalyst for me to do nothing at all. And it was years later when actually other things began to fit into place, and that was something I explored. What about you, Martine? Was there any catalyst for you that God was using that suddenly ignited a new purpose or a new uneasiness or just a new desire, something for him in you?
People had said to me at different times, "Have you ever thought about going into ministry yourself?" And I'd always said, "No, one vicar in the house is enough. Didn't need another one." Didn't think about myself. I always saw my role and was quite happy to be Peter's wife, to support Peter and to be a mother. And then different people in different areas started, "Are you sure? Have you never thought about being a vicar or ordained yourself?" And I kept saying, "No, it's not for me. I'm not clever enough. I definitely haven't got a calling. What can I do?" And then one day we were in church in St Catherine's in Pontypridd.
Oh, yeah.
And the church had been closed down and there was a new floor being put in.
The floor was being done, so we were all carted out of church, so we had to meet in the church hall.
Yeah. And Trish, the family and children's work there, had taken the children out, and they'd gone upstairs in the place they were doing Sunday school that day, and they came back with this wonderful drawing of a sword with all the heroes of the Bible in. And there was Jesus, there was Gideon, there was loads of names. And it was Father's Day, and you would need an impromptu altar, because obviously we weren't in church, and you had the cross and the Bible open, and you'd had some red petals cut out of tissue paper in a church meeting you'd been in
that was
earlier,
in St. Luke's
in Kilvanil. And Peter said that not everybody has a good relationship with their father, or may not be able to speak to their dad that day. And I was I just became transfixed on the sword which Trish had put behind the Bible after the children had come back in, and there was a sword with all these names written on it, and there was the Bible, and there was a flame, and there was an altar. And I just kept thinking, wow, isn't there something in the Bible about what is even more powerful than a double-edged sword is the word of God? So when we went home afterwards, I sort of like very gingerly, tentatively said, "I think I need to do a theology degree." And you did, that's it, one of those "I beg your pardon" looks.
Why?
And I said, because I said I really had this feeling that I needed to know my Bible more, that I had more I could give. And you said to me something on the lines of, "Do you feel the need to compare and contrast Old Testament prophets?" And I went, "No, I don't." And then you said to me, "I've had an email, I think you need to read this." It was about St. Padans and doing the Theology for Life course.
Yeah.
Then you made a big mistake.
What did I do?
You went away and you left me on my own. You went on retreat to Timor. And I can remember phoning Jordan Hilliber, who is part of the key people that run St. Padans in LLandaff. And I phoned him and I said, "I think I'm interested in doing this TFL course, or I think I need to be doing something." Cut a long story short, I went to see him. He asked me if I'd ever thought about being ordained. And at that time, it just came over me.
He asked you about
He asked me. And it came over me like a wave, and my automatic thing was to burst into tears and say, no, but other people have. And I knew as soon as I said no, it was because I should have said yes. And he said, I really think you need to go home and you need to think about this. And that was the start of it.
That was your trigger.
That was my trigger. It was like at that point, everything that other people had said, it was seeing the Bible, it was seeing about me needing to have the strength, about wanting to be a warrior for God. And I thought, I need to do this in my church, in the church in Wales. And next thing you know, I'm seeing somebody from Vocations, and now, God willing, I'm being ordained this year.
Virus willing as well.
God willing.
I know.
God willing.
We all have different promptings, we have different callings, and it is continuous. A lot of the words in the New Testament have this continuous idea, like keep on being filled with the Holy Spirit. Not just once, just keep on. And being alert to God and being aware of what God is calling us into is a continual sense of being anticipating, being expectant, being ready, and looking out for what God may be encouraging us into. It'd be really interesting to have Esther here and kind of say to her, so what was it like after you made that big step? Because she ends in the story at that point. What was it like before, and what was it like after? And did she continue to feel that she was really important even after that one event? So it was like a way of life. I remember about 10 years ago I had a sabbatical, and I was in America, and I spent quite a lot of time with different churches, different denominations, working with people on the margin of life, or people working in the nighttime economy. And after the few weeks that I was there, again, that was a catalyst for me to feel. Do you remember when I came back from there?
Absolutely.
I felt, oh, God is really saying I need to be more ready for working with people on the edge of life. And then it was quite soon after that I moved to Pontypridd and had the opportunity in Pontypridd to start working with street pastors in the night, working with Christians Against Poverty, and coming alongside people who were really at their wits' end in life. And that was a calling which developed. I heard what God was saying, and it was activated by going out and seeing what other people were doing.
I think for myself, I always thought I wouldn't have been welcomed in church before Peter and myself were married. Well, I was divorced before I married you, and I was a single mum, and I wasn't educated, and I didn't really understand church that well, hardly at all. So I thought church was somewhere that I wouldn't fit in. I didn't realise, as I do now, the church is full of broken people that need Jesus. And as soon as I had that feeling, and then I saw develop and do all these things with people on the margin, people who sometimes other people would just walk past and ignore, but you took the time out to be the hands and feet of Christ. And I thought, well, I can't be Peter. And then you have that light bulb moment when you think, God's not calling me to be you. He's calling me to be me. So there are people that I can speak to, that I feel safe in environments that other people might not do. But because of my background, because of my upbringing, because of me being me, whereas before I've always seen that as being the negative thing, God just completely whipped it up and turned it around. So he was almost using things which had happened in my life before to qualify me to become who I am today. If that makes sense.
Definitely. And, if we were chatting to Esther and we were able to ask her, when you heard God's call, it was through her uncle and through other circumstances. But when you heard that call, what did she make about the character of who God was? I know she was in exile and she was surrounded by problems, but in a way, we're in that position now, surrounded by a pandemic that a lot of people are fearful of, and a lot of people are saying, so where does God fit in, and what is God doing? Well, in the middle of that assault on the Jewish people in the book of Esther, Esther was in the middle of all the plots and in all of the attempts to do bad things. What could it be maybe in this period of time that God is going to be saying to all of us about our calling, how we should serve, and his view of us? Because God doesn't have a view of us where we are going to be called to do something which is terribly against who we are or terribly against our nature. So like what you said, God molds us from who we are to use the best of us.
I think often we look at other people and we think, we can't do that because I can't cook like whoever, I can't speak another language like whoever, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I'm not you. But that doesn't mean that God isn't equipping you to do something else that those people can't do. So somebody might be able to stand up in church and give a sermon. Some people are equipped to pray and can be part of a prayer ministry team.
Definitely.
Wow, what a ministry to have. Some people are outstanding at hospitality, making people feel welcome in church, making fabulous cakes and teas and coffees. And they might not think that's as important or even see it as a ministry.
Or as a calling.
Or as a calling. But if people are not welcomed into church and not made to feel a part of a church family, what's the point in the vicar delivering a wonderful sermon or the lay reader doing it? If people don't feel welcome, it is a calling on your life. And Jesus has made you you and equipped you to do what he wants you to do.
So this is a little bit of an introduction to a book which I really recommend. I think the Vocations team really recommended. Hearing the Call. You've read it, haven't you?
I have, yeah. The DDO, somebody who, the diocesan director of ordinance at the time, Tristan, recommended me to read it. And I've got to be honest, I didn't read all the books.
What? You better watch his video.
I have told him, I did confess, because sometimes there's different parts of church that people get on with, and there's other parts of church that you might disagree with or you don't understand, and that's okay, because now I'm coming out of this vocational journey. I can understand that God was still moulding me and will continue to mould me until my last breath.
And God's always got the best interest for us. If we're alert, if we are seeking God's presence and God's words upon us, then we're in safe hands. We're in the best hands that we can be in. If you might like to get a copy and are able to in the present circumstance, I'd encourage you to. But we're going to be looking at the chapters, and they take a person, a Bible character, and they look at it bit by bit with a little bit of a discussion on how that applies to us. I'm going to